Hey everyone, welcome back to the lab. In this video, we're going to be going over the top 10 posts on HAMY Labs from 2024 Q1. And so in Q1, I wrote about 40 posts covering software, tech, and side project topics. And that's kind of like a lot of posts. And so I wanted to pull out the 10 best ones according to readers, according to analytics, so you don't have to like sift through all of them to find the ones that might be worth watching. And so here they are. HTMX was pretty big this year, and it's kind of been big since last year, but really this year it's kind of hitting critical mass. And so it's no surprise to me that a lot of my best posts were around HTMX because that's kind of like a more mainstream technology versus like other technologies I talk about are often a bit more niche, we could say. So this one on HTMX versus Alpine, and this one comparing HTMX to multi-page applications and single-page applications did pretty well and continue to do pretty well. The next one's around kind of a mistake that a developer made in their side project, and they got DDoSed and they got a $100,000 cloud bill. So this one did pretty well, I think, because one, it's very relatable. I know a lot of people want to build side projects, but there's always the risk of it going poorly. And so this one kind of hits that, fear factor. But also I think it has some really good tips for kind of how to avoid this with your side projects in a very easy way that allows you to still build the simple side projects that are fun to build, but doesn't risk this kind of like financial ruin that happens. Number 4 on this list is why F# is a fun programming language. This one was kind of more of just like a fun one for, the F# community. I think we're F#ies is like a very small community, but we really like the language. It really is the best kind of thing for the niche that it solves for. And so this kind of packages a lot of the like great things from F# that kind of makes it so fun in the same way that like people that go to Rust kind of stay in Rust, people that go to F# stay in F#, in a very like easily consumable way. And I think this is why this one did so well, because a lot of the people on the inside kind of felt it was a good description of what makes F# great. And the people on the outside found it to actually be a pretty decent entry point into kind of understanding the ecosystem and why people like F# so much. Number 5 on this list is the HAM stack, which talks about kind of the software philosophy of architectures that I use and I think is best for most cases. And this is a simple scalable system, so it's not going to be the best in all cases, but this is going to be an 80-20. So it's like extremely good in 80% of cases, and it only costs 20% of the cost of other options, which makes it actually a much better choice in, let's say, 90% of cases due to ROI. And this really kind of comes back to a lot of the philosophies I have on software in general. So, and in a lot of like the tech stacks that I have. So HTMX and Alpine, these are low.js things that are simple scalable systems. They do a lot of what you need for very little complexity, very little cost. And so we see this is hypermedia as a monolith. It uses hypermedia on the front end and monoliths, which I've talked about, ad nauseum for years as being the optimal software architecture for most cases. And this kind of explains that in a very simple way with a lot of links to data. And I think a lot of people found this very helpful for at least collecting this, curating these ideas all into a usable package of ideas. So I think this is why this one did pretty well. And this is how I build software and have been building software for the past several years. Number 6 on this list is 3 ways vertical monitors boost focus and productivity for software engineers. So I'm weird. I have a vertical monitor here and multiple monitors, but my main monitor for writing, for coding, basically main focus work is always a vertical monitor. And whenever people like walk into my office, the first thing they say is like, oh my God, you have a workstation, you have so many cords everywhere. Like, how do you live like this? But the second one they do, especially if they're like a coder and they're like thinking about how they would code in this workstation, is they're like, wow, that's weird. You have a vertical monitor. And I've done this for years. And, I think it's not game changing, but I do think it is a different way of thinking about kind of work and the things that you're doing. And I do think it promotes focus on just one thing at a time, which I think is very helpful because that's usually the bottleneck in deep work. You can read more about that here. Number 7 on this list is 3 areas I'm exploring to build more side projects faster and cheaper in 2024. I wrote this at the beginning of the year as I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to explore and research, where I wanted my kind of technology journey to go. And already in Q1, I've done a lot of these things and kind of proved out some of them or redirected some of them. And a lot of it really is just around building with simpler software tools, simpler software patterns, and also just kind of like a reminder that software is never the end goal. Really, the end goal is the thing that you're doing. And so picking good tools that get out of your way, kind of like, really managing that complexity budget is very, very important for actually doing the thing. And you can read more about like this, which gives a good overview of all the kinds of other things that I explored this quarter. Number 8 on this list is my journey from software engineer to entrepreneur and back again, which is kind of a condensed, although it's like very long still, overview of kind of my journey from quitting being a software engineer at Fang at Instagram Meta, trying to start my own thing because that was like my dream of what I wanted to do with life, and then kind of realizing that actually the daily realities of that quote unquote dream was not ideal for me, and kind of finding myself back to being a software engineer. And this is kind of like my journey over the last year and a half, and kind of what I learned from this. I'm not surprised this one's kind of lower on this list because it is very long. I get kind of rambly in any of my like blogs or reflections because it's really me working through what I just did and like actually figuring out my learnings kind of as I go. But this one's gotten some really good feedback from people that I work with, other friends, and stuff like that, and started some really good discussions on like career life and stuff like that. So I'm at least pleasantly surprised that it did as well as it did for being so kind of like long and rambly. The next one on this list is building ASP.NET apps with Tailwind CSS. This is the only one that's really like a specific tech like how-to guide. And this is usually what I write most about when I'm like building projects. But it's clear here that like, those kinds of videos and posts, they don't do that well in a specific amount of time, but over time they usually do quite well because they like do well in search. And so yeah, nothing else to say here. It's pretty straightforward what it talks about. But I do think it's interesting that some of the things that I think are most useful, like there's no good guide on how to actually build this thing. And so I'm saving people like a lot of time, are not like the things that actually do that well on these kinds of platforms. So I don't think it's going to like change the way that I do posts or shares. Like my main focus is really just on solving problems that I thought were hard and sharing about how to do it so that other people don't find it hard. That's like the main thing here. But it is something to consider for people that are actually like going for views, I guess. And for what it's worth, I think this is like honestly like an interesting proof that like these weird niche guides I do are actually so niche that there's like not going to be any competition there because it's just not big enough for anyone to actually pick up. And coming in 10th, we got 5 reasons F# is a great Python alternative for scripting, side projects, and enterprise applications. I'm actually surprised that this one is so low on the list. I think it's maybe because it's one of the newer ones, but in the past, like in the F# community, I see a lot of discussion about this, of how F# really is a better version of a lot of different languages. Like, I'm obviously biased. I obviously drink the Kool-Aid, but like the reason I push F# is not because I want F# to win. It's I want technologies that fit values that are logical and that learn from the past like multiple decades of programming research to win, because otherwise we're just doing the same old things and running into the same old problems. And Python is a big one that I've used personally throughout my career that has all of these faults, but is still one of the top languages. And it's like very clear how a shift from that to a better language would solve so many of just the common pitfalls that people run into weekly. And so I thought this one would actually do quite a lot better because I do think it's a very good kind of comparison between these two languages. But F# community is very small, so these kinds of videos don't usually get very big. And I think from the Python side of things, like, they're drinking their own Kool-Aid. And so anything that's like anti-Python is like anti-them. And so they kind of like don't want to read that stuff either. But if you kind of new to F#, if you like Python, I would highly recommend kind of reading this because I think it's a pretty decent entry point to where languages of the past decade kind of failed to use any of that research from the previous 3 decades. And kind of these newer languages, although F# is not new, but a lot of the newer languages that are coming out are finally picking up the mantle and learning from these things and kind of not falling into the same failure patterns that previous ones did. So that's my rant on that, but I do expect this one to do a little bit more as the year goes on. So that's my top 10 for Q1. I've really enjoyed writing more and generally smaller posts this year. I still get rambly, but that's just how I communicate. So I don't know if I should like solve for that or not. But some of the biggest like kind of wins from this I've seen is because I'm kind of sharing so much more regularly, I can do these smaller ones, and it lets me kind of get a wider range of ideas out, which helps me kind of solidify my thoughts on them and kind of just log it, which kind of moves it forward in my mind. It also allows me to create more simple scalable systems. So if I'm thinking of like a problem, how do I solve this well? Then I can kind of create one, and then that's now a new like strategy in my tool belt, which I found like very helpful over the past quarter. And I've connected with a bunch of y'all on Twitter, some of you on Reddit, which has been really awesome to see kind of people with different perspectives, but still kind of the same interests and values of trying to make this kind of coding thing not suck so much, because really it could be a lot better with just some like simple changes. So that's been really great too, to know that I'm like not alone just doing that. So I'll just say that this has been pretty fun. I'll probably continue doing this kind of like slightly higher cadence of posting, maybe a little bit smaller posts as we go, but we'll just see. Question for y'all is there a specific topic or question you've been interested in and would like to read or watch about? This really helps me get ideas for what direction and kinds of things to kind of put on the roadmap. And so if you have been holding on to one of those, this is kind of your chance to let me know. If you like this post, you might also like why I write online as a software engineer, unlocking understanding, memory, and progress, and thus why do I make these videos so often. You might also be interested in how I got interested in F# to understand why I'm drinking the Kool-Aid and have been for the past like several years. Or maybe you're interested in kind of a more meta view of what I see as like the endless game, which is kind of a more meta version of why I keep making these, and how to find fulfilling work as a software engineer and achieve more impact with less stress. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.